Well, hello and welcome to Care for the Family's podcast, In Conversation With. I'm Catherine Hill and I'm the UK Director of Care for the Family. And it is fantastic to be joined today by Jonathan and Andrea Taylor-Cummings. They are the founders of the Soulmates Academy, and they have also recently done a fantastic TEDx talk on the 4 habits of every successful relationship. And this TEDx talk has gone crazy. It's had over 600,000 views. And so, guys, we're so pleased that you can join us today.
We're excited to be here.
Thank you, Catherine. Real honour and privilege to be here with you.
Brilliant. And what we'd love to begin with, really, is to look at these 4 habits and for you to unpack them, to tell us what they are and how we can each apply them to our own relationships. So,
Would love to. So habit number 1 is be curious, not critical. Habit number 2 is be careful, not crushing. Habit number 3 is ask, don't assume. And habit number 4 is connect before you correct. And these are habits for each of us to develop up front, to replace our automatic responses, which tend not to be helpful in a relationship. And the more we can learn these ahead of time, the more we can have better conversations and better outcomes. And these habits have distilled out of our experience over the 20-odd years and through the scars of having to learn them ourselves as well. And if we start with habit number 1...
What's really interesting is these habits we've just observed in the 20 years we've been doing this. Every successful relationship we've seen has exhibited these 4 habits.
Really?
Every failing relationship we've ever seen has missed one or more of them. So we've concluded that they really are crucial to successful relationships.
fantastic. And you've learnt the hard way, but also you've taught this and seen it in other relationships.
Seen it making a difference.
When we say learn the hard way, I mean, habit number 1, as Andrea said, is be curious, not critical. And that's the one we learned the hard way when we first set up in business ourselves 25 odd years ago. Because in that, we discovered, I mean, we set up the business having met at business school, and the story with that is Andrea came to the UK to get her master's, and she got her Mr.
Very good.
That's our story. We love sharing that story. But having met at business school and gone off into our professional careers in the city, myself investment banking, Andrea consulting, after a few years, we set up in business together. We thought, how hard can it be? We've got the skills, the qualifications, the experience. How hard can it be? We're really in love. We'd actually also had the opportunity of living 12 hours time zones away from home, so away from all family influences, and we really connected and gelled as a unit. And so we thought, let's set up the business. And it took us all of about 3 months to realize just how hard it could be. The wheels started to come off because we discovered we had very, very different work styles.
You'd like to tell the example of the desk there, don't you?
I was going to say so. So I'm a very much a attention to detail, very organized, very everything in its place. As somebody says, a place for everything and everything in its place. Andrea's not quite like that.
She's more creative.
Organized chaos is what I call my desk.
No, creative we'll go with. I like creative. But the problem we had, the real challenge was, the source of the challenge was we had, on our 2 different desks, we only had one computer, one desktop computer. This is the mid-90s. We had this one great big thing that sat on my desk. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And so whenever Andrea needed to use the computer, we'd have to swap desks. So I'd leave my desk nice and tidy for her, and she'd come in and she'd just go straight into it and do her stuff. And of course, I'd turn up at her desk, and there'd be organized chaos on the desk. Okay, what am I going to do here? So it'll be fine. I'll just move her papers into different little sections, and I can get on with it. She went, no, don't touch my papers. I know where everything is. Well, I can't work in this chaos. And the conversation would just deteriorate from there.
And what was actually triggering that was the fear that we were feeling. You know, suddenly it was frightening. We had this blissful experience, especially when we lived in Japan for a year. Everything working well, income was fine. Suddenly we're now running a business. We're pulling together is what our financial situation depended upon, and we weren't pulling together the way we used to. So it was very frightening and very unfamiliar. We were grating against each other. Simple things like the desk would cause a whole conflict set of arguments to flare up. And what was happening in the office would follow us home. So there was just tension everywhere, and it was really, really a desperate situation.
And the tensions at home would then follow you back into the office. There was no getting away from it. Either way, we had a challenge.
So it was really make or break. We had to find a way out of that, of being stuck in this cycle of frustration. When we looked around, we came across some material. It was the Homes of Honor series by Gary Smalley, way back then on, VHS cassette video.
Yeah.
And the light bulb moment we had was recognizing that it was our strengths that was causing the real frustration. It was out of balance, it was unrecognized and really unappreciated by us and by each other. And when we understood our strengths, when I understood that John was wired to be Mr. Attention to Detail, and actually he was our security in terms of watching the accounts, watching the legals, doing all the things that needed that attention to detail. I was more creative, I was more free-flowing and ideas and the people connector. And when we recognized that it was really our strengths that was causing the frustration, we learned to give each other the space and grace to be, and to be curious about what that strength could offer the teamwork, rather than constantly criticizing and expecting John to be like me or me to be like him.
Yes.
And I was going to say, Andrea needed to step up and be like me, because I was an investment banker. And I was perfect, as far as I could see. I had lots of strengths. It was all about delivering the results and making things happen. But I didn't have any weaknesses, right? Bankers don't have any weaknesses. Also, I thought. But for me, really, recognizing that Andrea had strengths on the people side of things is really what, like, wow. I got to the point of realizing, actually, this stuff is important. This is where families are actually made and kept together. It's all in the relationships of the people side of things, and I didn't have those skills. So for me, I had to learn that actually what I have is good, but sometimes I need to tone it down a little bit. Sometimes it's a bit too much, a bit too good, but I've got to bring up my skills in the area of people's. And I was learning from Andrew at that point in time.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
To really...
So taking a step back, asking yourself the question,
Yeah.
and playing to your strengths in a marriage or in a relationship.
And when Andrew would do things that I wouldn't understand, I'd have to stop myself and say, well, why did she do that?
Yeah.
She didn't do it because she's mad or deliberately trying to do something to derail the relationship. She did it for a reason. What was that?
Yeah.
And it was me really just spending that time to say, why did she do that? Be curious about it. Getting curious about it is really what saved the relationship at the end of the day.
Yeah.
One of the things that saved the relationship.
That's really, really good. So that was number one then.
Yep.
So be curious, not
Not
critical.
critical.
Okay.
critical.
Easy to remember. 2 C's. So that's good.
Yeah.
Right. Number two.
Number two, so this is be careful, not crushing, which is all about recognizing that because of the differences and different expectations, conflict is going to happen. How do we treat each other well and deal with the conflict well so that we come out stronger for it rather than damaging the relationship as a result? So it's learning to be careful, not crushing, because the fact is the default styles that we turn up to conflict with, they're really unhelpful. They're all centered about preserving me and crushing you. And it doesn't really matter how you feel, because right now it's about making sure I'm taken care of. You know, we might just come in to win at all costs. We might just bury our head in the sand and give in without talking about tough issues. We might run away because we just can't deal with conflict. Or we might just negotiate and compromise, where we think compromise is great, but actually you spend so much time trying to find the middle line on what 50-50 is that you never really talk about the issue and find what win looks like for both of us. I was reminded every time we talk about
thought you might share that,
I remember
yes.
this story of a dad with 2 sons, and they wanted to split a cupcake. And the first son said, well, can I get to cut it, Daddy? And the father in his wisdom said, yes, but your brother chooses the first piece. So, of course, all the time was spent with precision trying to find that middle line because you don't want to lose out. That's what we do when we go for compromise, where we're not really trying to find the solution that works for both of us. We're busy trying to make sure we're not giving away too much of us to get to something that would kind of work, but it never does.
And then in the relationship, it just feels transactional.
Yeah.
And who wants to live in a transactional relationship? And that's what compromise tends to do. So people say in a work setting, it's all about negotiation and bartering and so on. We said, well, that's fine. But do you want to live in that kind of setting? Do you want to feel like it's all transactional and it's all right down to a little bit of this and a little bit? No. Relationship is much more about connection. And you can't have that when you're trying to just be really exacting about how much you give. And I'll only give so much. Nobody wants to live like that.
We often talk about at Care for the Family finding the third way. So it's not just both of you giving in and going to the least common denominator, but actually finding a creative way that goes forward. And that's, I think, what you're talking about, isn't it?
Because sometimes it might mean me giving 100%.
Yes.
It really is about all of us. It takes all of who we are to create the right way for us together. And so with be careful, not crushing, we talk about preparing for battle, during battle, how to fight fair, and also how to reconnect after battle, because conflict is inevitable. It's going to happen. How do you do it well? And when we talk about preparing for battle, we talk about thinking about who you want to be in the moment. How do you want to behave in a way that's still respectful, still loving, still caring to your partner, so that you come out stronger in the relationship at the end. You use the conflict to learn and build understanding rather than to destroy the relationship. And one of the things that you think about, for example, is what ground rules do you want to set? What's important to you, and how do things impact you that you want to make sure in the heat of the moment you don't cross these lines. So for us, for example, the ground rules we set are we would never walk out the house in anger, because that landed really heavily for me. I guess security is a big thing, and seeing John walk out the door in anger felt like not just for the argument but for life. He was gone. So we said we wouldn't do that to each other, and we would never use the D word in anger. We would never threaten divorce just to be spiteful.
And interestingly, the word divorce wouldn't have really been a big deal for me, because words are not that important to me. But for Andrea, it was a very, very... To have used that word was a big threat. So I had to learn, actually, we're not going to do this. And we agreed in our relationship, well, it may work for some other people, that's fine. But for us, and if other people like us, it wasn't going to work, so let's not do that.
So it's
really
about respecting the person.
Absolutely.
And your feelings, yeah.
It's about being careful with their person, yeah.
So that's number two. Number three.
Number three, ask, don't assume. And this goes to the core of who we are. It's about learning to have more empathy and making ourselves vulnerable sometimes, because we each have these core values and beliefs that drive our behavior, drive our expectations, deep-seated things like the need for affection or affirmation or security or respect, things that we don't even recognize until they get trampled on and we feel disrespected. So being able to ask and discuss things rather than assume and stereotype, that's really important. Quite often it's so deeply buried that we don't know it until it goes wrong. The example we used in the TEDx talk speaks to this very powerfully, because the couple, Rachel and Steve, and by the way, it isn't actually their names, we're using to protect the innocent. They are both Nigerian, as it happens. They both come from the same cultural context. But the husband, Steve, had a far more traditional mindset. He expected his wife to do for him like his mom did for his dad. As a matter of fact, he expected his wife to be best friends with his mom, so she would learn how to look after him. So we're thinking, oh, really?
She was thinking, that ain't going to happen. That was never going to happen.
Yeah, because, they both grew up in the UK. They both went to business schools, had MBAs, worked as IT consultants, earned similar money. So she was expecting more equality and more mutual support in raising a family, doing the work thing, doing the housework, and so on. So when they had children and she was now more home-based, she expected that equality. He expected something completely different. We didn't know this was going on. Thought we were having a simple Sunday lunch.
So they're friends, yeah?
They're friends. They're friends of ours. Simple Sunday lunch to talk about a business the husband wanted to start. Yeah. And in the conversation, we realized Steve was doing all the talking and Rachel was kind of sat back and very removed from it. And you don't get away with that around our dinner table. So we said, come on, guys, what's going on? And we discovered they were minutes away from divorce. They hadn't been sleeping in the same room for 18 months. Looking at them, you'd never know. You'd think, young couple, young kids.
Just a little bit of life stress. But they'd be fine. They'd be absolutely fine. Just leave them. They'd be fine. But no, they were really going through some real trauma. And as Andrew said, they were just growing further and further apart. And even, as I said, to the point where the husband was now setting up this new business and the wife knew nothing about it. Yeah. So, well, really, what kind of relationship is that?
Yeah. And as it's, so it was this fundamental, this core belief that was driving the expectations. Thankfully, we were able to share some information with them that helped them reframe the problem and understand that your core belief is your core belief, but it's not necessarily shared. And being open to hearing somebody else's perspective being courageous enough to have the conversation and show your vulnerability, talk about these deep-seated issues. And you know they're deep-seated when somebody says something that you think is simple and the reaction you get is huge and visceral and from the gut and very angry. You know you've stepped on a nerve.
Yeah,
you know you've
pressed the
stepped on
button.
one of those core beliefs. And that was the issue for them, which was literally driving them to think about divorce. But within a week, this is how powerful just understanding the concept or the detail behind the habits and applying it. Their body language changed. Yeah. They were talking about the future. They were holding hands.
I was just going to say, what made the difference? So we simply just sent them away to go and look at one of our online courses. But the difference it made, they said, a week later, was it allowed them to have a conversation which they'd never been able to have.
Yes.
What allowed them to have that conversation was a recognition that actually, this is the way I've seen the world, and I've always seen the world like this. And of course, everybody sees the world this way, but actually recognizing that, no, maybe there's a different way. And she, the wife, Rachel, had a different expectation of the world than Steve's.
Yeah.
And once he was able to see that maybe there is another world out there, now all of a sudden he was able to cut us some slack and say, actually, you know what? That's a reasonable expectation of life as well.
Yeah.
I can only see mine, but now I can see a second one. Yeah. And then it was about asking and having conversations, asking questions and having that discussion that took them to another place.
Very good.
And that literally was within the course of a week. And as we always say when we share the story, if that was the end of the story, it would have been magic, great, well done us, great material. But really what rocked us was 2 weeks after that, when we caught up with them just to see how things were progressing. You could hear the excitement in their voice on the phone, but we thought, let's just have a face-to-face catch-up. And you could see it. I mean, the body language was different. They were on the sofa. They're holding hands. It was a different dynamic altogether. But in that, Rachel shared that, in her emotional lows, she just couldn't see a way out of this. Couldn't see. And they had young kids. Who knows whether she was going through natal depression, whatever it was, but she just couldn't see a way out. But in all this, she felt that she would just be abandoned by her husband. All she could see was darkness. And she got herself to this point where she just, in her mind, she made up her mind that, if Steve did go through with the divorce he was threatening, she would just write him a note, tell him to look after the boys, and just walk in front of a bus.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And I tell you, when she shared that story, Andrew was sobbing. I mean, I was.
Yeah.
We were just distraught.
Yeah.
Steve was hearing this for the first time. He had no idea what had been going through his wife's head. And
you said they looked like nothing was wrong from the outside.
No idea. All you would have thought is, here's a family that got young kids, 2 under 4. They're just stresses of life. They're probably not sleeping so well, but they'll be fine.
Yeah.
They'll be fine.
Yeah.
Just they'll be fine.
Well, what it made us think is, but for a chance conversation around dinner and daring to go there is what we call it, when we saw the body language saying something was wrong, it could have turned out so differently for them. It would have been just a statistic on mental health or on suicide. But it was so preventable. And that's why we're so passionate about saying, let's be proactive about being equipped to do relationships well. There is nowhere, apart from a church context where you might have a pre-marriage course or a marriage course, there is no context for us to learn fundamental skills for doing relationships well. And it can prevent us going down the wrong path unnecessarily and having such tragic outcomes. Yeah. And the frustration is that people could be around us and we would just never know because we're not talking about it enough.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, at Care for the Family, we often talk about relationships can be spiralling downwards, and it just takes one thing sometimes to kickstart it in the other direction. It doesn't mean that the whole thing's sorted, but it begins that process, and that's why these habits are so important. Yeah. So number 1 is be curious, not critical.
Absolutely.
Number 2, careful, not crushing.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, we step away from the C's now, and it's ask, don't assume. And then what's the final one?
Back to the C's
back
again.
To the C's.
It's connect before you correct.
Connect before. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's all about being deliberate about creating warmth in the relationship by showing love and value and appreciation in meaningful ways. We're kind of hardwired to tell people off, to give constructive feedback when they're not doing things right. And that, especially in the British culture, we're very good at pointing people and how they can do things a little bit better, but not so good at pouring value and warmth and appreciation, being deliberate about making people know why they're loved and why they're special, or how loved and special they really are. So connect before you correct is getting better at communication in general, knowing that it's more than the words, it's the body language and so on. But finding strategies that help you communicate love in a way that lands powerfully with the other person. And one of the models that we love talking about in terms of connecting well is Gary Chapman's 5 love languages. And between us, in our family, we have them all
We
covered.
have all of them.
Is that right? With your boys as well? Brilliant.
Which really has helped us, has taught us how important these 5 love languages are.
I know that you've talked in the past that these love languages, they play very much into this 4th habit, that connect.
That's
before
right.
Before you correct.
Correct.
And you've talked, I know, before about the emotional tank.
Bank accounts, yes.
Tell us a little bit about that concept.
The emotional bank account for us is a hugely powerful tool because it really allows you to, well, it certainly allowed me when I first came across it to realize, actually, you know what, I got this. Now I have something that I can use to manage my relationship and improve it. Because the emotional bank account is simply a mental record that we all keep of every interaction that we have. So the moment you first meet somebody, you set up this new bank account with them. So therefore you have lots and lots of bank accounts with all the people around you. But we're very sophisticated pieces of kit and we can manage lots of different accounts here, right? So all it is a record of every interaction with us. So if it lands positively, it's a deposit. And by the way, it's got nothing to do with how I intended it to land. It's all about perceptions. It's how it lands with you.
So money in.
It's money into
right.
the deposit. So if I say something to you and I meant it with a goodwill and if it landed badly with you, it's money out.
Yep.
If it lands well with you, it's money in. So at the end of at any point in time, you can sense what the quality of the relationship is by the balance in the account. So if it's a positive account, the relationship feels good. If it's 0 or negative, overdrawn, everything feels scratchy, horrible at worst.
Easy conflict and tension.
Very, very easy. So I can have exactly the same conversation with you when the bank account is positive and it's all good. Same conversation, same person when the account is down here, and all of a sudden I get a completely different response. And I think, well, what did that happen for? We've had this conversation before and you were fine with it. It just means your account is now negative.
Yes.
It landed badly with you. Yeah. So the game in town, as we like to call it, is to keep your work, do whatever you can to keep your bank account in positive territory. Because
Your emotional bank account.
your emotional bank account. Your emotional bank. If you keep the other
And
one as
your
well,
financial
keep that one as well, then great. But the things that we're doing that are causing it to go into overdraft, almost like bank charges in your financial bank account. They're things that you're doing unintentionally because, of course, nobody's doing things to wind the other person up or say things to do to land badly. But they're things that we're doing. So what you want to do is minimize those, and you want to maximize the deposits. So minimize the withdrawals, maximize the deposits. Great strategy for any type of account. Keep it in positive territory. And as we discovered when we were working on the TED Talk or the TEDx Talk, is two of the habits, the first 2 habits, in fact, are all about minimizing the withdrawals. By practicing those, you minimize withdrawals.
So
be curious, it's not critical, and be careful, not crushing, help you minimize withdrawals. And habits number 3 and 4, ask, don't assume, and connect before you correct, help you make deposits. So if you work on those 4 together, you're actually taking control of your relationships and keeping it in positive territory. So us men like things to, okay, if we do these 1, 2, 3, 4, I can do this. So for me, it was great. It was like, now I've got the tools to keep my account in positive territory. All I've got to do is develop these habits and I can keep the relationship.
And I know there's research that shows that in the early years of marriage, what's really, really key is not doing the bad things, and then in the later years of marriage, it's the cherishing, isn't it? It's the doing the good things,
because
which
it's so
plays
easy
into that as well.
Yeah, it's so easy to start taking each other for granted as the years go on, and we forget to do the things that made us feel cherished and loved and valued as years go on. But the more deliberate we get about living out these habits, making those become the new automatic responses, the better the balance in the emotional bank account, meaning the more warmth and the more connection you'll experience in the relationship. And that's why the habits are crucial.
Yeah, and even with the work we do is we work with couples, we also work in an organizational setting, helping people improve the quality of their relationships there. And the language we discovered works perfectly with emotional intelligence that Daniel Goleman talks about in his Emotional Intelligence EQ book, which is all about awareness,
which is habit 1.
Habit 1, be curious, not critical. Self-management, be careful, not crushing. Empathy, which is all about asking, not assuming. and social skills, which is all about connecting before you correct. So this is all about helping people build their emotional intelligence so that they become better people and relate and interact with each other better and have, as Andrew said, better conversations and better outcomes.
That's really good. Well, what I love about all this is that it's not only great research, great theory, but actually you've lived it out. You've discovered it, that it's worked.
Continue to,
and continue to. And I think that's the other thing. It sounds very easy when we're talking about it here, but actually in the midst of family life, when those little buttons are pressed, when we're disappointed, when our expectations aren't met or whatever, it's really good to be able to just go back to them and even take baby steps.
That's right.
That can make a difference.
Keep practicing. We say practice makes cortex.
Yeah,
I know we like to talk about practice makes permanent, but practice makes cortex because it literally is.
Explain that.
Well, it's unlearning old habits and relearning new habits and literally creating different pathways in the brain.
So cortex is a different part of the brain.
Part of the brain,
it's
the structure of the brain and how
Very
we
good.
think.
I like that. That's fantastic. So just tell us, run through them very quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Habit 1, be curious, not critical. Habit number 2, be careful, not crushing. Habit number 3, ask, don't assume. And habit number 4, connect before you correct.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. It's been wonderful having you with us. So that was Care for the Family in conversation with Jonathan and Andrea Taylor-Cummings. And we hope you've enjoyed it. And we really hope you'll tune in to some future episodes. So goodbye. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I really hope that you found that helpful. As a charity, we seek to come alongside families to offer support and encouragement in the ordinary and the extraordinary seasons of family life. We provide support for marriages, for couple relationships, for parents, single parents, for those caring for children with additional needs, for those who have been bereaved, particularly those who have lost a partner early in life or those who are grieving after the death of a child. In all kinds of different ways, we come alongside families and we say, this is not just you. At Care for the Family, we know that every family faces challenges. Every family needs encouragement. So check out our website and see if there are some resources there that will help you in your particular season of family life. And if you see something and just at the moment you can't afford it, then just drop us a line and we would be delighted to send you that resource free of charge. And we need your support to help us to continue to do what we do. So would you be able to send us a gift? Even a small amount would be an incredible encouragement to us as together we seek to strengthen family life in our nation. You simply go to cff.org.uk/give. I am so grateful to you. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us.